So what is the best smart home platform for your home? Do you go with the walled garden approach of Apple? Do you go with the vending machine-like capabilities of Amazon Alexa? Or do you go with the omnipresent Google Home? I've personally been bouncing between Apple Home, Amazon Alexa, and Google Home over the last few months, and the best platform, in my opinion, is Apple Home. Next up would be the harder to set up Amazon Alexa. And if you're looking at using Google Home, well, I'd wait a bit since Google Home needs to do a lot of work on that platform. With that being said, none of these platforms are perfect because there is a fundamental problem that no one can really get around. I've come to this conclusion after spending thousands and thousands of dollars on smart home gadgets over the last few months and switching them between the different platforms. At Smart Home Reviews, Monty and I base all our reviews on actual usage, which means that we'll set up a product, use it for a long time before sitting down and rating it through our rating system. And we do all this to make sure that our reviews are consistent. We can try to keep them relatively unbiased. At the end of the day, I just want to answer the question, how do I get the most out of my home? And whatever I come up with is what I'm going to share with you. In the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about hardware setup, apps and automation, data privacy and security, remote access, and voice control. Well, in a nutshell, Apple Home is going to be the easiest to set up, followed by Alexa and then Google Home. Now, I've mapped out all the steps, and it usually takes you 1 step to set up a new gadget in Apple Home, 7 steps in Amazon Alexa, and 6 steps in Google Home. Now, for me, it was mind-blowing to see how much simpler the Apple Home approach was. All you have to do is install the accessory, go to your Home app, line up the HomeKit code, and just let Apple do everything else. You don't even need to install the manufacturer's app to use the device. Everything is done in the Home app. It's a 1-step installation process, 1 app setup. It's awesome. With Amazon Alexa compatible gadgets, you need to first download the manufacturer's app, link to the gadget's own Wi-Fi, install the unit, sign up for the manufacturer's web service, go to your Alexa app, find the corresponding manufacturer's Alexa skill, and link that to your account. And the worst part is that it doesn't work all the time. You go through all that and it might not work. Look at all the ratings in the Amazon Alexa skill shop. They're all very low. From my perspective, there's just so many places where something can go wrong. The app could be faulty, connecting to the web service could be faulty, the Alexa skill that you have to install could be faulty. There's 3 things that could go wrong software-wise, whereas in Apple Home, it's just 1 thing. It's again mind-boggling how simple Apple has made it and how every other platform has just made it so difficult to install a simple gadget. For example, trying to set up this KooGeek Smart Plug P2 in Amazon Alexa took 3 days, multiple attempts, and multiple KooGeek.com accounts. You compare all of this to the 3 minutes it took me to add the Smart Plug P2 to my Apple Home setup. Now, compared to Alexa, Google Home eliminates the last step of finding the right skill to install, which is great. Kind of. Google Home just listed all the compatible products, which is nice, but seeing the brand doesn't necessarily mean all the products are compatible. At the time of this review, I am able to add my Nest account to Google Home, but I can't use my Nest Cam IQ with Google Home. This is surprising to me because it's not like Google owns Nest or anything. Now, I said Google Home needs a bit more work before anybody can seriously consider it. Why? Because at the time of this video, I am unable to install any of my smart home devices using an iPhone 7 Plus. Now, I contacted Google Home support and they suggested I use an Android device to do so. How is cross-platform functionality not like a thing? Are we back in 2001? It just seems like I'm dealing with back in 2001 trying to use a Mac in a Windows environment. It just never happened, and it's all these flashbacks coming back to me about that time when I first started using Macs at the turn of the century. I need an Android device to install Google Home. What? So I had to use my Galaxy S7 to install everything, but here's another kicker. The list of compatible devices is much shorter on the Android app than it is in the iOS app. Google puts out a new product in a new industry, we'll say, and the product is again underwhelming. I am again reminded of my first attempt at trying to use Android Wear. That was god-awful. As well as using Google's first tablet, the Nexus. The Nexus tablet, that was something else too. If you're finding the videos that you're watching useful, consider getting your things through my links, as I'm not sponsored by anybody. This is all the money I spend on the products comes out of my own pocket. So anything you buy through my links, I get a small commission, which helps me in the near future make more reviews about smart home gadgets. Another concern that I have for Amazon Alexa and Google Home regarding hardware is the possibility of a manufacturing going out of business. What happens if Belkin, which probably isn't going to go out of business, decides to stop making their Wemo devices, which might be a possibility? There's a good chance that my plugs are going to be useless since the support isn't going to be there anymore. With Apple Home, because manufacturers have to meet Apple's HomeKit requirements, strict requirements I'll add, there's a much higher chance that my devices will work for a while, even if the manufacturer goes out of business. On the flip side of the equation, as of right now, there are way more compatible gadgets for Amazon Alexa, but that's probably going to change in the near future, as Apple did change the HomeKit standard a bit in 2017. And so the thing you have to consider is that the setup process with an Apple Home setup is way simpler, less of a headache, but in most cases, you're only doing it once. So do you suffer through the setup processes with your Amazon Alexa and Google Home gadgets, or do you just get it over with your Apple Home? So that's really another question you have to consider. Now, how easy is it to control and automate your smart home using Apple Home, Google Home, or Amazon Alexa? I will say that I have more confidence in the security of my home now that I've installed a gaggle of smart home devices that allows me to basically monitor whatever is going on in my house. Out of these three platforms, Apple Home makes it incredibly easy for me to access and automate my home. Amazon Alexa doesn't have the same capabilities, but you could still access some of your gadgets through Alexa outside of your home, and Google Home just gives you, well, nothing. When it comes to the app from a smart home perspective, the Apple Home app is better. Why? Because I personally don't like to verbalize everything. The Apple Home app allows me to control all my devices using Siri, but you can also toggle them on and off in the Home app easily. You can't do that with the Amazon Alexa app or the Google Home app. I can't emphasize what a big deal this is to me because I can basically get a snapshot of what's going on in my home at once. It's basically a shortcut bar for my entire house. This may not be a big deal if you're only running 1 or 2 devices in your home, but when you've got a dozen connected devices, it's nice to see everything at once. The icing on top of the smart home app cake is the fact that HomeKit compatible devices will show up in other third-party HomeKit apps. For example, my Elgato Eve app can access every HomeKit device, which is great since I really like the setup of the Eve app. Apple has basically forced developers and manufacturers to build/design their smart home gadgets to meet Apple's high standards. I will say that this is probably a boon to gadget manufacturers as well as developers because they have to work that much harder to get their stuff working with Apple HomeKit. Previous HomeKit devices required a hardware chip to encrypt the communication between everything. I think Apple has removed that requirement. Encryption is still there, but it's all software. So we will see more HomeKit devices. With Amazon Alexa and Google Home, you have to use the manufacturer's own app to toggle the device. Now, this might not be an issue if all you bought are Belkin products, but if you're running a plethora of devices from different manufacturers, well, you're going to have to download more apps, and well, finding the right app generally gets kind of annoying. Now, I believe there are third-party apps that will solve this problem, but they all don't look well coded, and I'm very hesitant to commit to these apps. Now on to automations, which again, as I said earlier, is probably the greatest strength of the smart home platforms. Now with Apple Home, automations are baked right into the Home app. You don't have to download anything, you don't have to sign up for anything. With Google Home, with Amazon Alexa, you have to sign up with IFTTT or Stringify, and on top of that, you have to link all your existing web services to that service, so it just gets a little bit more complicated. Remember in part 1 of this series where I talked about the number of steps it takes to install a smart home device? It's kind of the same story here with Amazon Alexa and Google Home automations. It just seems so silly to me that Google and Amazon didn't do what Apple does with the automations. Like it really boggles my mind. The standout feature of the Apple Home automation is the ability to trigger one based on your location. Now, I have a feeling that Apple Home uses both the location of your device as well as your home network to detect whether you are at home or not. My location-based automations work every single time with Apple Home, whereas in the equivalent one set up through IFTTT might be a hit and miss. This location-based trigger is going to be important for those who want to lock down their house when they leave. An automation like that needs to operate at 100%. But I will say this, that using an automation platform like Stringify is going to allow you to do more complex automation. So basically Stringify allows you to say if A happens, then B happens, then C happens. Whereas in a lot of the Apple Home app automations, it's if A happens, then B happens, right? So if you want to string together slightly more complicated automations, you go with Stringify. And in my mind, that is very attractive to people who also like Android because you can customize it more than your Apple thing. For the majority of us, for me anyways, I'm perfectly happy with whatever automations Apple Home has. I don't really care much for taking it beyond that. I will say that Apple needs to improve the automations in their Home app, as there are several things that annoy me about them. Basically, my annoyance revolves around the inability to trigger on data from smart home sensors. For example, I am unable to turn on a fan or a heater in one specific room based on the temperature on a HomeKit device, like this Eve room. Another thing that really bothers me is that the moment that you've got 5 or 6, you can't name the automations. They're all named after what the automation does. And so you've got automations that run every single day, and it just kind of gets lost. Like it just seems silly that I can't organize my list of automations. So I guess when it comes to data security and privacy, the question you have to ask yourself is, do you actually care? If the answer is no, and you're basing your decision based on privacy and security, then you'll be okay with any one of these smart home platforms. Now, if you do care, you'll probably be leaning more towards Apple Home. Even if all 3 platforms were 100% secure, you still have to make a decision based on what those companies will do with your data. The business model between Apple, Amazon, and Google are very different, and each company will use that collected data accordingly. Basically, all the data that your Amazon Alexa collects is going to help you buy things easier. With the data that Google Home collects, it's going to show you things that you should, or it thinks that you should be buying. And with Apple Home, they're just going to convince you to spend more money on their overpriced hardware. Amazon Alexa and Google Home are always listening. I have no idea what they are recording or not recording. It's nice to know that they're always there, but there is a certain level of uncertainty of what they're actually doing. I'm guessing at some point Amazon will automatically send me a box of facial tissue when it hears me complain that I'm out. And I'm guessing that Google's probably going to start showing me advertisements for things that I talk about in private. You know, I honestly don't think we're too far off with Google Home listening to my conversations. Like, you know, maybe I'm joking about ball gags, and I joke about it enough that Google Home is eventually going to show me advertisements on the websites through Google Ads for ball gags. Like, that's not unfeasible in the near future. Now with Apple Home, everything is encrypted. Your requests are encrypted. The data stored about your home is encrypted. So it sounds like everything's just really hard for somebody to figure out what you're asking Siri to do in your home. A good example of Apple setup can be seen in the HomePod's keynote, where Phil tells us that the HomePod only starts listening when you say, "Hey Siri." Now none of this information is new, as Apple has made it clear in the last few years that personal information privacy is a top concern of theirs, whereas in Google and Amazon base their entire business models on mining your personal information in order to improve their services. However, at the end of the day, if your private data, information, you don't really care about it, then this doesn't really matter. I will say that, yeah, last week I was walking to get brand new olive oil, or fresh olive oil, because it just tastes so much better. Little did I know that the store was closed on Thursdays, and you know, it is not unrealistic for me to see, you know, Google Home or Amazon Alexa sending me a text alert saying, "Wherever you're going, we think you're going to buy olive oil, but heads up, Aaron, the place is closed." So instead of me wasting all my energy in plus 30-degree weather, 30 degrees Celsius, it could have saved me that trip. That would be beneficial. When it comes to overall security, Apple again has the upper hand, as they claim that everything that occurs between your devices, between your home and Apple server, is encrypted in a way that even Apple can't see what's going on. When it comes to Google or Amazon, I have no idea if they can have the same claim. I know there's some sort of security between the services and devices, but they are not as open as Apple is when it comes to overall security. At the end of the day, I'm very certain that Google and Amazon are working very hard to protect everyone's data. What I don't like about the Google Home and Amazon Alexa setups is that I have to use a bunch of third-party apps and a bunch of third-party services. So there's a lot of fingers into my home, you know, and I'm unsure of how stringent those companies are with their security. Do they have the same level of commitment to protecting my data as, say, a company like Apple does? I'd rather put all my eggs in a company that is flat out saying, we're going to protect your private data and we're not going to snoop on you, rather than letting my data just kind of float across, you know, half a dozen companies. I've got 6 different manufacturers for smart plugs for Amazon Alexa. I have to sign up for 6 different web services. 6 different companies have my personal information now. So those are all things to consider. For the normal human being, it might not be a big deal unless you're doing something illegal in your home, I guess, maybe, I don't know. Here's an example of why I'm kind of weary about, you know, all these different third parties. When I was setting up my Nest Cam IQ, I couldn't get it to work, so I had to contact Nest customer support, and they were able to see all the devices that I had. So basically, my video feeds, my information is sitting with a third party that might not really need it. And really, well, I guess Nest is part of Google, so they probably prioritize protecting my information, but how about the other companies like CookGeek? I have no idea. It's an Amazon seller, so I have no idea how strong or how committed they are to my privacy and protecting my data. You know, another way to look at it is with Lego. Apple Home is this long piece, Amazon and Google is this equivalent piece made from several smaller blocks. Which one's going to be stronger? But I'm generally unfazed about companies using my data. Like, I'm not completely paranoid about it just yet, so it might not matter. Again, it's a personal preference, but at the end of the day, do you really want to be seeing Google advertisements for ball gags? When it comes to smart homes, one of the standout features really is being able to control everything remotely, as well as using your voice to control your home, which is, you know, kind of cool. First thing my parents asked me when I told them I was going to be reviewing smart home gadgets was,
"Can I check up on my house when I'm gone?"
"Yes, you can, Dad."
Okay, that's good.
Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record because remote access, again, goes to the Apple Home. If you set up an Apple Home with an Apple TV or an iPad, everything runs through iCloud and you access your home outside of your home like you would do in your home. With Apple Home, you can see the status of all your devices with one app. You don't get this with any other platform. With Amazon Alexa, you basically tell the AI to turn appliances on and off, but it can't handle queries about the status of appliances. You still have to use the manufacturer's app. For me, the most awkward part of remotely accessing my Amazon smart home is opening the Amazon Shopping app in order to use Alexa. I can't use Alexa in my Amazon Alexa app. What? When it comes to Google Home's remote access, well, it gives you a big fat bagel. But this isn't really going to matter because most of the products that are compatible with Google Home and Amazon Alexa provide remote access through their web services, so if you really wanted to, you can control your devices through their apps. But again, you're running multiple apps on your device, and ultimately it's just not as easy as just using your Home app in Apple Home. When it comes to voice control, issuing commands to Siri, Google, and Alexa, I personally prefer Alexa. I know it's a shocker, it's a category that Apple doesn't come out on top, but this is a very personal thing. If you're unfamiliar to use Apple Home, you just say, "Hey Siri." For Alexa, it's just Alexa. And for Google Home, you have to say, "Okay Google." I will add that if you're using anything other than English, Siri is going to be a clear winner, but English is my first language despite, you know, my physical appearance. So with all that out of the way, I prefer Alexa because it feels like I'm giving a command to Alexa. You know, when I'm talking to Monty and I'm commanding him, I have to tell him, "Monty, down." "Monty, sit." You know, my tone is very authoritative. And so when it comes to controlling my smart home, that's the same tone that I have. So, you know, "Alexa, turn on the smart lights." "Alexa, turn on the dehumidifier," right? The tone that I have, I'm not really giving Alexa a choice to choose. But when I say, "Hey Siri," any single time I start a sentence or a question with "hey," my expected response isn't finite. You know, if I'm asking my wife, "Hey, can you check to see if the back door is open?" She might be doing something and she's probably going to say, "I can't until I do this," right? So there is no finite outcome. It's not going to happen right away. It might happen. So when I say, "Hey Siri," it just seems like I'm giving Siri the chance to not turn on my lights. And the worst part is when I get frustrated and I have screamed, I have yelled my lungs out at every one of these platforms, is that screaming Alexa is way easier to get out of my head, out of my mouth, than screaming, "Hey Siri, hey Siri, hey Siri." It just gets annoying using Siri after a while because you have to say, "Hey, hey." Like I don't have that same authoritative tone when I say, "Hey." You know, when I say to Monty, I don't ever say, "Hey, could you possibly sit? Could you possibly, hey Monty, can you lie down?" It doesn't work. Now on to "Okay Google," which is the most emotionless command I can give an AI. I think I do have to give kudos to like Windows and Amazon and Apple for trying to give their AI's personality, but with Google, like it's, you know, I use Google as a verb, right? So to start off, especially with the word "okay," "Okay Google," I only use "okay" as a full sentence, like somebody tells me something, "Okay," right? It's hard for me to get my head, like it just seems very awkward to say, "Okay Google, turn on my lights." "Okay Google, turn off my dehumidifier." "Okay Google, tell me what the temperature is." It doesn't roll off my tongue as easy as just saying "Alexa" or even "Hey Siri," right? It's hard to, like, a command like, "Okay Monty, go eat your food." I guess that one didn't sound too bad, but it doesn't have the same flow. Now I know all of this is quite fluffy, but because, in my opinion, my home is a fairly intimate place because, you know, my wife and I live in it. We raise our family in it. So being able to talk to it in a relatively intimate manner, I'll say, is something worth considering. But again, considering all the other facets, the data security, the installation process, remote access and everything else is shining Apple, screaming, "Hey Siri," a bunch of times, might not be a big deal. But again, I'm just pointing this out just so that you know about it. So here's the fundamental problem I have with the current versions of smart homes that we can get, is that we can buy gadgets to try to turn our dumb houses smart. But it really is kind of in the middle. It's dummart or smum. I can buy all these gadgets to automate my house, but at the end of the day, my home isn't going to be Jetson-esque. When I look at all the appliances in my house, I realize that I still need to power them or give them additional instructions if there is power. I did a video where I showed how you could turn on your kettle automatically based on your alarm clock, but you still need to turn the kettle on at night. You know, that's a very good example of what I call the fundamental problem. Take my Dyson heater, for example. I bought it to warm or cool my house, but I can't use it with a smart plug because I can't leave the fan on while it's plugged into a smart plug that's turned off. The fan defaults to off the moment that there's no power. To circumvent this problem, you could buy a new fan or heater that's compatible with your smart home, but that's like a waste of $400 or $500 when there's nothing technically wrong with the Dyson. Another example would be lamps. Putting a smart bulb in the lamp is a neat idea as long as you never turn the lamp off. This might be okay for lamps in the living area, but how about your night lamp? Isn't it easier to turn your lamp off physically instead of fumbling with your phone or tablet? If you turn that lamp off automatically, you can't remotely turn it back on. There's no power to it. It needs power. If you really wanted to solve this problem, you could replace your nightstand lamp with a $250 Philips Hue Phoenix. That sounds like a reasonable idea, right? Another example would be in the eating area. You put a smart light bulb in the light fixture, which allows you to set the mood via colored lighting, but the moment that somebody flips the switch, well, those smart LED bulbs are unreachable until somebody turns them on again. You could circumvent this problem by having a smart light switch as well as smart light bulbs, but that's like another $80 to $100 gadget you have to get just to solve this fundamental problem. Those are kind of the best examples that I could come up with to illustrate this fundamental problem. I don't know exactly how to solve it. I would have to go buy new appliances, and that just gets expensive. You know, if you spent hundreds of dollars buying smart home gadgets, and I have to spend hundreds of dollars to buy new appliances. So I think we're on the forefront as of right now in terms of smart home gadgets. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be neat coming out, but don't expect your home to be Jetson-esque. It will make managing your home a little bit easier. It'll be cool being able to see what's going on in your house outside of your home, you know, for peace of mind and everything. But there's still a lot of physical hurdles that, you know, Amazon, Google, as well as Apple have to overcome in our homes before everything is truly smart, in my opinion. So, you know, if you're trying to figure out if you want to go with your smart home stuff now, then maybe hold off. But again, I'm just doing all this. I'm sharing this with you because this is what I've discovered while reviewing all these different products. If you found this very long video useful, give it a thumbs up or consider getting your stuff through my links, as I get a small commission for helping you find stuff that you're going to buy, which helps me in the near future for other near future videos. All right, that's a lot of talking. I gotta go. Thanks for watching. This is Monty the Ho. We're awesome. You're awesome. I love you guys. See ya.